What's up guys, Cwesolo here, and today we are back for another part of how to code in C#. Today we are going to start our little mini section on loops. So the first loop that we're going to be covering is a for loop. I think for loops are the easiest one to understand, and they are also the most common. So we're going to start there. So generally for all loops there are two main things in a loop that comprise all the three different forms of loops. You have a looping condition, which is a condition that needs to be met to get out of the loop. And then you have the looping body, which is the stuff that's being looped through, right? So, for example, if you want to count to 10, right, and you want to output that to the console, you need to have a variable that's going to count up. You need to have a condition, which would be when that variable is equal to 10, and the looping body, which is what the stuff that's going to be printed out to the console, right? For loops actually have a couple extra things. So we're going to construct a for loop, and the way to do this is you're going to type in for, right? And we are going to use int I. So typically it is an integer value that runs a for loop, and we're going to set it equal to 0. So we're starting at 0, I want to count to 9, right? Which is 10 values. So, and it's going to print 0 to 9. And then we're going to set I is less than 10. Now you can do less than or equal to if you want to go all the way up to 10, 0 to 10. You can do that too. But we're going to go just less than 10, semicolon. So these are like mini lines of code within these parentheses here. So these are like their own individual lines, right? So if you were to be, this is the variable declaration, right? This is the looping condition. And then this here is the increment, right? Now there is something that I need to go over and touch on here, is that this may look a little confusing to you because this is probably the first time you've seen this. This is the same thing. So if I make an integer, right, we're going to make an integer up here. We're going to go int, and we're going to call it num, right? And we're going to set num equal to 0. All right, and we want to, add 1 to num, right? We want to make num go up 1, right? So you'd go num is equal to num plus 1, right? This here is the same thing. Can't forget your semicolons. This here is the same thing as this, right? It's just incrementing up 1. Now you can also there are other things that you could do. So if you wanted to go plus 2, well, you could just do here plus equals 2, right? And now it's going to increment by 2. And you could do the same thing, if you want to do subtraction. Now it's going to decrement by 2. It's going to go down 2, right? So yeah. And we are going to just go make this do plus plus real quick, just to go up by 1. But you can do the same thing even with multiplication. So if you want to go num times equals 10, or 10, right? It's going to increment num. It's going to times num by 10, and then set that equal to whatever that is. It's the same thing as you to go num equals num times 10. It's the very same thing. So it's just a shorter way of putting it, and it will conserve space, and it's kind of useful in if statements. So, but if you wanna do your if statement, if the plus plus confuses you, you can absolutely go I equals I plus 1, and that's 100% fine. This will work. This will do the same thing, right? That's 100% fine. If you want to just kind of just take that in, we could just leave it at that. But just know that I++ is the very same thing. All right. So it's just a shorter way of adding a thing to your variable by a certain amount, right? Okay. So now we have I is equal to 0. So we have our variable, our looping condition, and our increment. And now here is a looping body. Now what we're going to put in the looping body is we're going to just essentially just print out I to the console, right? We're going to just increment it up in the console. So let's do that. We're going to do console.writeLine, and then we're going to put I in there and hit the semicolon, right? Just like that. And now when we run this, it's going to just output 0 to 9, just like that. We have a fully functional loop. Now do keep in mind here, be careful when you're writing loops, because there is a thing such as an infinite loop. And I can easily construct an infinite loop like so, and just by screwing up this nice little thing here, and the condition is now as long as I is greater than 10, and this is going to essentially do nothing. But let's say we want to make this is I is less than -10, right? This is an infinite loop. This is going to go on, well, it's not going to do anything right now, but essentially this isn't printing anything. It's not letting it happen, but you can make an infinite loop on accident, and it'll basically loop forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And you don't want that. That's not good in your code. So just know that, just be conscious of when you're making these loops, that you need to make sure that like whatever it's looping to, it can get there. Whatever the condition that needs to be met, it needs to be able to meet that condition to get out of the loop, right? Now, there are certain scenarios where you're going to want to loop until a certain condition is met, and in this case, you are using an integer to get to a certain value, which in most cases, you know, there are some cases where you wouldn't want this. You might want to be looping for, you know, for example, whether or not user input is valid, right? You might want to loop until you get a valid input from a user, right? In that case, you wouldn't want to use a for loop. You'd want to use something like a while or a do while loop. Which leads me to the other kinds of loops. You have do whiles and while loops, which are a different form of loops. We'll be covering whiles in the next episode, and we'll cover do whiles in the last looping episode. There are many scenarios in which you'd want to maybe use a loop. There are many algorithms, such as the sorting algorithms. If you have, I guess, I don't know how I can think of examples, but that aren't like, that are small examples, but I guess we'll go with what computer scientists would be using. For example, you have a graph, right? And you need to get through a graph. You want to find the shortest possible path. For example, you have a map, right? And you have a whole bunch of distances between cities, right? And you want to know the fastest way to get from Chicago to LA by only using certain cities. For example, you're an airliner, and you need to stop at specific spots to refuel to get to a certain city, right? You might, want to, figure out what's the shortest way I can get there by going from city to city. Well, in that case, loops would be useful to find the shortest path, right? So loops have a variety of situations in which you'd want to use these things. I guess we can also go, for example, in my game, The Amazing Ball, right? I'm using loops to, for example, if you go to my level select screen, which I'll have a nice little thing on the screen here showing what it does, each of the images is running through a loop for the controller input. And the controller input also, the loops also determine like which button is highlighted, right? And it just loops through until it finds the button that is highlighted, and it'll change the color and also display the image on the screen. So that's another scenario in game development where loops are useful. Loops are useful everywhere, and it's very important that you need to that you understand how these things work. So, also, for example, arrays. We haven't talked about them yet. We'll be talking about those after we go through the rest of the loops here. But arrays, you can use loops to traverse through an array. If you're either wanting to print all the values to the screen, or you are searching for a specific value in, for example, an array list or a linked structure, you might want to use those to traverse through various different data structures, like arrays or an array list or a linked list or something along those lines, right? You're going to definitely want to use a loop to find what you're looking for. And like I said, searching algorithms also use loops and stuff like that. Searching algorithms, there's a whole bunch of different algorithms that use loops to achieve what they're trying to achieve. Like Dijkstra's algorithm use loops. I don't expect you to know these algorithms. We might actually have future videos going over these algorithms in depth and actually coding them up for ourselves. If you guys would like that, just leave a comment. We might get to that. And we'll cover various different algorithms and how they work. So stay tuned for that, actually. So that's how you make a for loop. I think I've done enough explaining how these things work and what they're used for. I guess my challenge for you guys is to, I don't really know, to construct a loop for yourself, play around with them, and make some counters. So make some counting loops to count through very different things and output to the console. At the moment, at a beginner level, that's really what for loops are good for. So just make a couple for loops, get kind of just play around with them a little bit and see how they work. I know that this is a very not crazy tutorial on like if statements, but the for loop isn't a very hard loop to understand. So it's very simple. You have an integer, you have a looping condition, and then you have the increment, and then you also have the looping body. So yeah, if you guys like the video, leave a like, comment if you have anything to say, subscribe if you like, if you want to see more how to code content or game development content. Also, check out the description below so you can go potentially wishlist my game on Steam. Go check it out. I'll have a link in the description, and also go check out my website also on The Amazing Ball. Yeah, so I guess I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.